Thanks, Julian, and just a quick congratulations to all the entrants into the Ken Erickson Award. It's certainly some fantastic entries this year, and congratulations to John Holland and to Sydney Trains for their 2 awards. So thank you very much. Great to have Caroline Wilkie here with me this morning. So Caroline, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Caroline is the CEO of the Australasian Railways Association. But before we get into having a bit of a chat about what the ARA is up to, I'd just like to give you all a bit of a background on Caroline. So she worked as the Chief Executive Officer of the Australasian Railway Association since February this year. Prior to that, Caroline served as the CEO of the Australian Airports Association for 9 years. So she brings a wealth of experience around policy and advocacy to ARA, and with a track record of working with government and industry to deliver nation-building infrastructure investment into critical transport networks, both in the connecting both urban and regional communities. She's got a Masters in Public Affairs at the University of Sydney. She's got a background in communications and public relations, and she was appointed the National Manager of Tourism and Transport Forum back in 2003. She's got a strong belief that the railway industry touches the many lives of people both in Australia and New Zealand. Whether it's catching trains or trams or light rails in our cities, or working with business that rely on the freight network. So rail is really essentially driving the economies, producing productivity, and really shapes the development of the industry across Australia and New Zealand. Caroline will continue to develop the ARA's strong focus on safety regulations, skills development and the implementation of new technologies, which we've been talking about today, within the rail industry, as well as defining the future of the agenda on behalf of the ARA members for the rail industry. So would you join with me in welcoming Caroline? So welcome, Caroline.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. So you've been in the job now for, it's not a year, it's only since February.
Yes.
I suppose, what's your first impressions of the rail industry coming from the airports and the aircraft industry?
There are a lot of similarities between the airport sector and the rail sector in terms of major infrastructure. I think my first impression was definitely how diverse the rail sector is. It's in some ways quite challenging compared to airports in that you have all of the state jurisdictions.
Yeah.
Really exciting about the amount of investment that's going on over the next 10 to 15 years, and so that's very much been a focus for us since I've started. But overall, I've also been impressed with the diversity. I went to Ausrail at the end of last year, and I was actually quite impressed by anecdotally, there is a larger number of senior women in senior operational roles here in rail compared to airports, which was great to see.
Was that your first Ausrail?
Yes, it was my first Ausrail. It was incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing, the amount of people we do get that support Ausrail.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. You also started here, back in February, which was right at the time when the COVID-19 or coronavirus sort of hit. Great time to start a job, not. But I suppose the advantage of being able to go out and meet all of the members of the ARA, it gave you an opportunity, I suppose, to reach out with them one-on-one. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I was quite lucky in the first month that I was here, Danny, because Danny and I had been working together since the end of last year. So I was appointed to the role, or announced as getting the role, in September of last year. And so I had quite a lot of lead time, got to go to Ausrail, got to meet with the board and a lot of members, which was fantastic. And on reflection was a saving grace in light of what happened. Yeah. And then Danny had done this fantastic program of a month for me to go around and meet with members, go to events, culminated in the dinner in Brisbane on the 12th of March, and we had the board meeting on the 13th of March. And I still remember us having conversations about, do you think we should cancel that lunch we've got in 2 weeks? And now when you look back on it, you think, wow, we had no idea what was going to come. But it's been great, quite the challenge. A week after that, we moved, the team that I had only just started working for or with moving remotely. So it's been an interesting time. The plus of it, and I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, is not travelling means that actually we've got a lot of time to get some really meaty work done.
Yeah.
I've just started travelling again in the last couple of weeks, and I'd forgotten what a time suck it can be, going back and forth. But I mean, it's fantastic to get out and see everyone now. So that's great.
I think I remember that. That was the Brisbane ARA networking dinner.
Yes.
We were a bit light on numbers there because it was that very weird phase where, our normal meet and greet was nothing. There was people doing the usual, and other people sort of bumping elbows.
Yeah, actually at that point, some people, we had a number of tables cancelled because their organisations had stopped travel at that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a weird time, but pleased to see we're coming out of it. We've got Ausrail next month, the first week in December, and we've just announced we're going to be able to do social events, which is fantastic. So we can start getting everyone back together.
I think the PWI is looking forward to that as well. I suppose with that in mind, that interaction with the members, it's probably a good opportunity to stop and reflect on where we're going. Some great leadership with Danny and Bob over a number of years, but I suppose from your point of view, where do you see the ARA and what's your vision for the next maybe say 5 years?
We've been really lucky in recent periods. We've been able to do a number of reviews. So we've done a stakeholder review of the wider industry, and we've also done a membership review, which has been really interesting because it was able to give us all of the data we needed to tell us very clearly what the members and the wider sector want from the ARA. And first and foremost, with everything we've done, it's advocacy. It's about raising the profile of the rail sector and making sure that we are advocating on key issues and getting runs on the board. So that's very much our focus, and we'll still continue to do the great events that we've always done, still continue to do some fantastic programs for industry development, future leaders, our mentoring programs, our understanding rail courses. But since I've started, it's very much about focusing the business more heavily in that advocacy space.
I suppose when you think about it, excuse me, rail missed that opportunity for a long time. I think it was Brian Nye, when he first started up the ARA, started to bring the industry together so we had a bit more of a voice. Excuse me. When you look at other industries like roads, hate to say gun lobbies, all those groups that have a very strong industry backing and support base to actually push and work with government. The railways really didn't have that. I think we've taken it to a next level, but you see that moving further?
I absolutely do see it moving further. I think part of it is about changing the way the rail sector is seen. And it's really funny because when I accepted this role, I love working in the infrastructure space. One of my favourite things when I worked at the Airports Association was we did a lot of work in the pavements and lighting space on runways. I really enjoy that. But it's about how you present our industry. And when I told other people, I'm going to be the CEO of this organisation, I got quite a lot of interesting remarks about, it's going to be you and a bunch of 60-year-old blokes. And
you're probably right.
Well, but it's not. I mean, that's not what the industry is. And it's, this vision of people who are at home with train sets. That's not what this is. This is an industry that's dynamic, innovative, technology. We're at the forefront of sustainability. And so how do you change that message to say, actually, we're an innovative, technologically advanced digital sector? And that plays not only into our image and how we're perceived and advocacy, but even about how you get people to want to be in the sector. Yeah. And so, if you were a young engineer coming out and you had the option of going into something fancy in digital or rail, what would your image of rail be? I mean, and I just talked to members and the vast majority fell into the sector as opposed to actively choosing to be in the sector.
Well, that's exactly how I got into it. I recall, just getting a phone call one afternoon saying that I had an interview the next day with the railways, and I was working with the Public Works as a trainee, and went into the office and said, why would you want to work with the railways? And the guy gave me a download of, he had a friend who worked there. I would never have moved into the railways. And then, as you're right, a lot of people fall into it, but I think our real challenge for an industry moving forward is how do we start to attract it's not only attract the young people and people who are doing their HSC to get into the industry through universities, but it's also changing the perception of their parents and their grandparents and others to think, why would you want to get in the transport industry? Why don't you do this?
Yeah, so we have a plan. We have quite a big program in this space. We've actually gone out to 3 state governments with plans for virtual skills academies. So these skills academies would attract students from years 9, 10, 11 and 12 to look at the rail sector and actually engage with local rail operators. So that's one part of it. Second part of it is approaching universities. So my understanding at the moment is there's not a single university in the country that has an undergraduate rail engineering unit in their courses. We also want to have some discussions with some universities about whether they want to get a chair of rail to actually boost the profile of rail. And I've also met with Engineers Australia about how we raise the profile of rail amongst engineers.
Yeah.
But it's broader than that. So we've, it's the marketing. We'll be launching a new careers website in the new year, which will actually have a lot more information about what the opportunities are in the rail sector and partnering with members to talk about apprenticeship opportunities, if there's holiday programs and the like. So I think, it's very clear from our Biz Oxford report that there's going to be a shortage. We need to bring people in. There are some challenges in terms of, credentials and how people get into the sector.
Yeah.
But we're working through that. I'm also co-chairing the National Rail Action Plan Skills Agenda through the federal government, and so that's all the state governments and the federal government united looking at skills and labour issues in the sector. So I'm feeling optimistic that we will be able to get some headway in this space, but it's a big challenge.
Yeah, I think when you talk about the Biz Oxford report, it's interesting because it talks about this tsunami. We talked about the tsunami of projects coming, but the labour shortage is huge, and just talking about trying to get graduates and things like that, or undergraduates to move into the transport sector, that's only one part of the puzzle. We've got to look at displaced industries that that are moving in a different area. How do we attract people from some of those other businesses? If you look at the automotive industry in Australia, where we've closed down plants in South Australia, where do those people go? And they moved
the
into
aviation sector.
Yeah, that's correct. So
yeah.
I think that's really going to be a key driver, I think, of how we fill that void.
Absolutely.
If we can. Okay. I suppose with the pandemic, how do you think the rail industry's actually handled that compared to, say, some of the other industries?
Based on our interaction with members, I think incredibly well. Our membership renewal was almost bang on compared to what it was last year. So in terms of, if you look at organisational strength and engagement, we're still seeing that. From my understanding is the projects are still ongoing, albeit some are maybe slightly delayed due to COVID, but everyone is still moving ahead. So my impression is on the whole quite well, and quite well compared to other sectors. But obviously, thank goodness for JobKeeper. And I think that the test will be once we get into the new year, into 2021. Yeah. But interestingly, when we did a COVID survey early on, most of the members were feeling fairly confident about where things would get to. I think the big challenge in all of this, and the discussion point, is around the lowering of the public transport patronage numbers.
Yeah.
And I've had a few questions about it recently about, well, what does this mean in terms of the investment pipeline? And that's our role to say, well, you delay things, it costs more to build. And regardless, and I was having this conversation with someone yesterday about Sydney, the patronage numbers are down and people might work from home more. Okay, yes, but there's areas of Sydney that are currently underserviced with public transport, and a lot of these new projects are about bringing these areas public transport access to start with. And the second thing is there is an obvious plan for moving Sydney, as an example, into a multi-city city. So we need to link Campbelltown, we need to link Liverpool, we need to link Parramatta. So it's not just about bringing everyone into the CBD, it's a wider plan. And whilst this has been a horrible year and very challenging, I have no doubt that the growth will continue. And I suspect people will start getting sick of working from home. So we'll see. But there was even something in the paper today about it's wearing a bit thin for some.
Yeah, I think it depends on your home sort of environment, I suppose. But
yeah,
I think we're all starting to venture back for the ones that had to work from home.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I was pretty impressed too with, a number of us are on the rail contractors group for the ARA. Pretty impressed with the way that the ARA pulled that group together during this, and how all of the different companies from across Australia really got together and spoke openly and frankly about how they were managing things, transferring information.
Yeah.
You know, some of those kind of things we wouldn't do in the past. So I thought that's been
Thank you. We're very lucky to have Nat Curry, who looks after that part of the business.
Certainly
She's
are.
doing an exceptional job. In terms of both the rail industry group and the RCG group, they've been fantastic and been meeting a lot during this process. What's come out of all of this has been, an increased focus for us this year on procurement. So we've had the rail industry group came out with their rolling stock procurement framework. Yep. We've got the RCG groups got their rail contractors procurement work, which is similar with some changes, and that will be launched in coming weeks. We're also undertaking the first of its kind major piece of work about the rail supply chain in Australia. So that's, from construction right through to, people who build the widgets. What does the rail industry look like in Australia? And then actually the plan is, once we've got that piece of work by Biz Oxford, to then look at what is the blueprint for the future and how do we support the industry. And realistically, we've had very little support from the Commonwealth and state governments for the rail sector and rail manufacturing, and the splintering of it at the moment in terms of state-based procurement is leading to suboptimal outcomes for the overall growth of our sector and our export capacities. So I think that will be a very big focus for us over the next 6 to 12 months.
You raised the procurement strategy, again, being driven out of the rail contractors group, which I think is a good strategy, but I suppose you answered part of that question, but where do you see that going, and how are we going to be able to push government to get a national approach? It's one of the bugbears for a lot of contractors, the different approaches to procurement, particularly, not only at the high level, but at all levels of the supply chain.
I think from an ARA perspective, it's a focus. We've got this plan, and then we'll work out an implementation plan going forward. But I'm also really excited about the fact that we've looked at partnerships. So we've met just this week with the Rail Contractors Association and also Roads Australia, because they've got similar issues in their sectors as well in terms of state government and procurement. So we're looking at a wider partnership to look at how we can share information and push some of these common issues forward, which I think is really great.
Yeah, excellent. You mentioned some of the research programs. I'd just like to bring on the one that's just been released around the innovation piece. There's some interesting things in that. One that concerned me is that the R&D seems to be dropping off significantly in the rail sector, and then the closure of the the rail manufacturing centre as well. So those kind of things don't all hold stead for a vibrant, Australian industry. So
no, they're not good news, to be honest. That paper was great for us to get a sense of, well, where are we at? What is the problem, and where can we go from here? I think it's really clear that we need a central body or central group of some description to be working on R&D for the rail sector. It's something we'll be talking to both federal and state governments about. In the first instance, we've released the report. We're going out and meeting with relevant groups to talk to them about the issues and concerns. And we've also looking then to form a wider industry group with the likes of RISB, ACRI and other organisations in our membership to actually look at, well, what do we need to do moving forward? But I mean, this piece of work is just the start for us in terms of major work we've got. Next week, no, not next week, the week after, we're launching the new Value of Rail report, which is really exciting because for the first time we've got both passenger and freight, and it's also about health, safety and environmental benefits of the rail sector. Yeah. And that's really going to be the cornerstone of the work that we do moving forward on the benefits of the sector, how we contribute and raising our profile with government. So that's quite exciting.
Yeah, I think for the other people that are tuning in today, if you don't know a lot about the ARA, then you probably need to get in there and get involved. They're doing some great stuff. The advocacy pieces are really important. If you look at things like the national competency process that we went through last year, looking at signalling, we aren't there yet, but at least we've got a document. We're doing the same thing with the electrical
that's kicked
competency.
Off, yeah.
So again, it's interesting listening to Gary from Google this morning about how how much you can do things better when we tend to do things, this state does it this way, that state does it this way, and
Yeah.
we like that bit of kit over here, but we don't like it over there. It's ridiculous. So it's one of the roles that the ARA plays. Maybe just as we finish up, one of the other key important things you have is looking after the rail industry worker group. Maybe you could give our listeners a little bit of a heads up on where we are with that.
So RIW is going strong, big take up that's being run by Nat and her team as well. I think the big part of that is what you've already mentioned, which is the frameworks and the standardisation that we're looking at. I think it's a great opportunity for us to just make it easier for people in the sector to engage and move from workspace to workspace and different site to site. So certainly a big priority for the ARA moving forward.
Great. Okay, I think that's getting near to the end of this discussion. I hope everyone's found that interesting. Thank you, Caroline, for your time.
Thank
I know
you.
you've got a very busy schedule.
Thank you.
Great.
I'll do a final plug for Ausrail. Ausrail's in a couple of weeks and we do have social events. We are going to see each other, so I do encourage you to come along and get involved.
Okay, thank you, Mark and Caroline. Fantastic conversation. And look, I'm an ARA board member. Being under Caroline's watch is great. You know, we've got really exciting times ahead with some fantastic advocacy, fantastic projects, and you know, it'll be really good to see that we get some good positives in the future for that.